So before we go and throw the quadratic equation at you, it's kind of important that you at least see where it comes from at least once. Depending on what class you're in, this is going to be more important or not as important. If you're in a class that's more geared towards scientists and engineers, they're probably going to ask you to reproduce this at some point on a test. If you're for a class that's more for general knowledge, maybe not so much. But I'm going to show it to you anyway, just so you have some exposure to it. So remember, in a quadratic equation is anything that would look like, say, this. So you have some number squared plus some number times x, and then some plain number by itself. Okay, so in previous videos we've talked about completing the square. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say completing the square, you should go check that out, because otherwise it's going to make absolutely no sense whatsoever. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start out with a generic ax squared plus bx plus c. The ordering this is really important, so see that we have it labeled to where we have the squared term, and then the x, and then the plain number by itself. Okay, so when you use the quadratic equation, you're always going to want to have things to be in that particular order. Now when we did completing the square, the very first thing we did is we made sure that the coefficient of the x squared term was 1. And to achieve that, we divided everything by the coefficient of the x squared term. So ax squared divided by a is just going to give us x squared. Now bx over a, we can write like this. There's nothing wrong with writing it like that. We just kind of move the x over to the side and go there. And this is just going to mostly look weird because you've got a lot of letters in it, but it's really nothing different than what you've already done on completing a square. Alright, the next thing we did is we got the x's all by themselves on one side of the equation. So we had x squared plus b over a times x equals negative c over a. And again, it's just a lot of algebra, but it's just a lot of algebra. That's all there is to it. Okay? Then the next thing we did is we took the term that was in front of the x, coefficient of the x, and we divided it by 2. That's the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. Alright? Then we took that number and squared it. Remember, the squared applies to everything inside, so 2 squared is 4, and then a squared. And then we added that number to both sides of our equation. So we had this to get started. And then we added b squared over 4a squared, or b squared over 4a squared, to both sides. Got it? Okay, now, on the left, remember that at one point we said we can write the thing on the left as a perfect square, as x plus whatever this term was here. And we would just plug it in right here. So you don't actually have to think too hard. You just have to stick it in there and blindly accept that it's going to work. If you actually FOILed that out, it in fact would give you what you have in the line above it. But, you know, if you don't have to think, why should you? Because, you know, it's completely unnecessary. You've got plenty of other things to think about. Okay, now here on the right side of the equation, we're going to need to come up with a common denominator. So I'm happy with the 4a squared on the bottom. That's actually going to be a beautiful common denominator. So to get from a here to 4a squared down there, I got to say to myself, okay, we'll have to multiply the top and the bottom by what? 4a, right? If I multiply the top and the bottom by 4a, I'll get 4a squared on the bottom, and then 4ac on the top. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm just going to rewrite this here on the left. And on the right, I've got negative 4ac plus b squared all over 4a squared. Okay? I'm also going to go ahead and just rewrite it in a different order because it looks weird starting at the negative number. So b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Next step, if you remember from completing the square, is take the square root of both sides of the equation and add your plus or minus out front. And again, if you're getting lost in the algebra, that's okay, depending on where you're coming from and what you're trying to do with this. But it is important to have an idea about where this equation comes from, because it comes from something, in theory, if you were alone on a desert island, you could derive this formula yourself. Remember, when I take the square root of something, it's the same thing as taking the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. Okay, so I have x plus b over 2a equals, it doesn't really matter where the plus or minus goes, so let's leave it up front. Can't really do anything with the thing on the top, but the square root of 4a squared, square root of 4 is 2, square root of a squared is a. So now I'm going to go ahead and break this out into two parts. X plus b over 2a equals the positive b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And then x plus b over 2a equals minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay? Now if I want to solve for x, it's just as simple. And I put that in quotes because usually by the time you're learning this, this isn't something that's necessarily simple whatsoever. In fact, it's quite challenging. It's probably the hardest thing I did at the time that I was learning this. So if you're feeling like you want to, like, I don't know, stab your face with a spoon or something, it's totally okay because that's how everyone's supposed to feel. Or at least that's how I felt. So I have minus b over 2a plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now I have something similar on the right. They actually already have a common denominator, which is kind of nice. And then if I do this over here on the right, can't see what I'm doing. If I do this over here on the right, I'm going to end up with minus b over 2a minus root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So again, minus b minus so you'll see that these two sides are actually the exact same thing, except one has a plus sign and one has a minus sign. Which is why, when we write the quadratic formula in general, for any quadratic formula, the general solution is that x is equal to negative b, either plus or minus, depending on which solution you go to, the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And this is something you're going to want to commit to memory. There's all kinds of weird songs and stuff like that that help you remember it, but I'm not singing them because that would be weird. But in any case, it's something good to have committed to memory. And I guess the theory is if you forget it on a test, you can always derive it. That's probably not a reasonable expectation at this stage. But in any case, it is something that you're going to need to know for sure, because you're going to use it all the time.